Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to session 47 of Talking Asperger's with Andrew. My name is Andrew Marsh, and I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome 7 years ago when I was 51, and that made everything fall into place. All sorts of things about my life growing up, how I felt as though I was different, didn't fit in with people, all fell into place with that one simple diagnosis. What I now do is I work with employers and people on the spectrum to help them better manage people with autism and Asperger's syndrome in the workplace. I have my own Seven Steps program, which I work with employers to show how to go through various stages to get the best from people who have Asperger's, understand their idiosyncrasies, their little ways and foibles that they have, and how to utilize their strengths in your business. What I would like to talk to you today is about a very important point, a very important topic with regard to working with people with Asperger's syndrome, and that is change management. Now, people will say change happens, it's inevitable, it happens all the time. Yes, understand that. But, and this is where the bit after the but is the really important part, I hate change. A lot of people with Asperger's syndrome and autism also hate change. We're very much creatures of habit. We like our ducks in a row. We like to know we're logical, we're methodical, we're coherent, we're consistent. We like things to be the same. So when change happens, it's not just a case of, oh, it's change. Okay, we'll adapt, we'll carry on, and we'll move forward and go. People with Asperger's syndrome take change more difficultly. They find it more difficult to adapt to change. And so when you're working in a team or you're working with someone who has Asperger's syndrome and you need to make a change. And yeah, I've worked as a geologist for 23 years in the construction industry. So I know that change happens. Change can happen at any point in a project. Your boss, your director, your project manager can come up and say, we need to make a change. I've just been on the phone with the client and they want to change something. That's all well and good. It's how you process that change so that the person with Asperger's syndrome can understand the need for it and understand the impact on what they are doing. I remember one particular occasion when I was working on a dockyard project when I was back as a geologist, and we were working for interdisciplinary teams within the main firm. And the main project manager came down and stood in front of my desk. And I went, "Hi, Alan, there, how can I help you?" And he said, "We've got to stop." And I said, "I beg your pardon." He said, "We have to stop work now." And I looked at him for a moment and I said, "Are you aware? I just need to make you aware that if we stop and I get reassigned and the team gets reassigned and all the other people involved in the aspects of the project I'm managing get reassigned to do other things, when you come down and say we can start again, I won't have those resources available to me. I might not be available." He said, "Yeah, I understand that, but we've got to stop." I said, "Well, I can't stop now. I can't. I really can't stop what I'm doing now. I need to have a day or two to make sense of what I'm doing, to take it to an to a reasonable conclusion, so that when you do say, 'Can you start up again?' I know where I've got my pickup point from." And he said, "Okay, you've got till the end of tomorrow." I said, "Okay." I said, "I do appreciate what you have just said to me and the impact it has on you, because this is a major project for the firm. And the last thing that you wanted to do was to walk around all your team leaders to say, we've got to stop. So I understand that you've just had a very difficult morning to come down and tell me that we've got to stop, because I've got to go and tell all the other team members that we've got to stop." And I had teams from other parts of the business working for me. He said, "Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that. But I haven't got any choice. I haven't got any choice. We have to stop." I said, "Okay, I'll finish up tomorrow end of play tomorrow afternoon, so that at least when we do pick up, I've got a logical place to pick up from, and I know where everything is, and I've got my continuity notes that I'm going to make, and all this." He said, "Yep, okay, I understand. Thanks." That was a dramatic change. It so happened that within a week, we had you can start again. And fortunately, I got most of my resources back, which was quite a task to get my resources back, because in the work that we did as a geologist, we might be working on a project for 6 weeks, 2 months. There were some projects I worked on for 9 months, one project for 9 months. So you take me off that project and I might get put onto another project that could be a 6-week project or a 3-month project. I then can't suddenly leave that 3-month project to restart something else again. The scheduling and programming of the team members, it's not a case of I've got 10 people sitting doing nothing, I'm going to pick 3 of them and they're going to do something today. You have to make sure that everyone is all gainfully employed, they're fully utilized at 95% per week, and that's what you have to do. You have to manage your teams. So when something like the dramatic "we have to stop now" in the middle of a major project happens, it's a significant impact. I then had to go to my director of my branch of the business that I was working for and say, just had the main project manager down, we've got to stop what I'm doing. And that means these 3 people are going to be available. It means I've got to go and speak to the team next door, and they've all got to stop. They've got to be available for other work. He said, did you make him aware that when you say we need to start again, you might not be available? I said, yeah, I fully made him aware of that. I said, we can't just pick up, because I'm not going to have the team members all sitting around doing nothing for X unknown days or weeks until they say start again. I've made him aware of that. Okay. Okay. Just make sure that you've documented that, because that's a problem for us. I said, yeah, I know. I'm aware of that. So that was a big change. And that we had to think in a different scale of how we dealt with that change, which we did. We got over it. And I say, fortunately, when we got the nod to restart, we were able to restart with most of the resources available. But other changes can be the nitty gritty things that happen where you're working away on something. Say it's Wednesday afternoon, 3 o'clock, cup of tea time, and your boss comes down and says, "Got to make this change." Okay. Are you aware that the report is going out on Friday? Uh-huh. And you want to make this change? Uh-huh. That means the 3/4 of the report that I've written, I've got to go back through and read the 3/4 of that report and make that change and see where it fits. Because it won't just be I just slip in a paragraph somewhere in chapter 1. I've got to see how that follows through on everything. I've got to see whether there's a technical change, whether there's a recommendation change, whether there's going to be a fundamental change to what we're recommending, what we're designing, whether what the settlements are, stability, all sorts of parameters that we need to look at. I can't just say, one thing, no problem. I've got to look at the whole report, the whole project, and see how that one thing impacts. You really want this to go out on Friday afternoon? Uh-huh. Okay. I'll do my best, but can't promise it. We have to deliver it. Well, who's made the change? So I then have to ask my boss who's made the change. The client has. Okay. Did you make the client aware that this is going to take longer? I said we could do it. Well, perhaps with respect, it would have been worthwhile coming to see me and saying, we need to make this change. What sort of impact is that going to be? Is it going to be a day late, a week late, a month late? Give me the opportunity to assess what the impact of that change is, so that we can program it, we can resource it. Does he know that it's additional fees if we go over Friday? Yeah, I told him we can do it for the original fee. So that's put me in a very difficult situation where I've got to make a change. I was on program to deliver the report for Friday afternoon, get it signed off, QA form signed off, in the mail, cover letter, all the rest of it. And now we're having to make a change. So that was a change that directly impacted me. But other changes can be your boss coming up and saying we need to do this and we need to do that, and they don't necessarily realize the impact that change makes. And it could be, well, actually, do you know what, off the top of my head, and I need to sit and think about it a little bit longer, but off the top of my head, that's going to take another week. So that's another £1,500 in fees. Is the client going to pay that £1,500 worth of fees? Because if he's not, we've got to do it We've got to do a week's worth of work in a day and still get the report out, and maybe change the drawings, maybe change the appendices, some of the enclosures. Maybe we need to change those. So all of those things, all of those knock-on effects aren't necessarily in the forefront of the person who's making the change and the impact that that change has on the people that are actually doing the work. So if you're going to make change to someone who has Asperger's syndrome in what they're doing, even if it's just a small change, if you can know in advance that you're going to make this change, don't just walk up to them and say, we've got to make this change. Got to do it now. The better approach is to walk up to them and say, I'd like to talk to you about something. Can we schedule a cup of tea, say 4 o'clock? I've got some things I need to organize in my head, but we're going to need to discuss the project. Let's sit down and talk about it 4 o'clock with a cup of tea. That way, the boss has then formulated his thoughts. He can think about what he wants to do, and he can think about how he can explain to me how he's going to make the change, what the change is, and how we're going to make it, so that I can then say, okay, you do realize that it's going to change the report. It's going to change the outcome of the report. Yeah, it's going to take longer. I can't physically manifest another week's worth of work in a day. It's not going to happen. Because one of the things that happens is that people on the spectrum, when they're given a change and it absolutely doesn't, I'm going to say it doesn't compute with them. And I don't mean that from a comprehension of English point of view. I mean that from a, you can't be serious. You cannot really mean we're going to make that change. And you've said that we still have to meet this certain deadline. There is too much work to do. The person with Asperger's is going to look at it in terms of how much work they have to do, how much work other members in the team have to do, and how that impacts everyone, how that impacts them, and how it impacts the other people in the team. And they immediately, because they're we're very free thinkers and we can think of scenarios all the time, say, yeah, that could take another week. It might take 2 weeks. Is the client going to allow for that additional time and the cost associated with that? If so, then okay, that's better than not. But let's sit down and organize our thoughts on how we're going to implement the change and have a discussion about it, rather than just getting an email from your boss saying, we need to make this change, have it done. The person with Asperger's syndrome is going to be sit there and they are going to get really agitated, anxious. They might start shaking. They might start vocalizing. They might start shouting. They might go almost into a meltdown, or even go into a meltdown almost straight away. And they might stand up, shout, scream, because what happens is the impact of making that sudden change without consultation and without forethought is they go into an emotional overload situation where they have lost the ability to cope. And that causes a meltdown. A meltdown is different from a toddler's tantrum. A toddler's tantrum is you're not getting another biscuit. And the toddler then goes and bangs on the floor, lies down on the floor, bangs on the floor, shouts, screams, and swears, and or whatever, shouts and screams and throws things. That toddler knows exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. They want another biscuit. And they're going to make your life, you as dad or you as mum, absolute misery for as long as they can keep it up until they get their other biscuit. They get their other biscuit, they stop. Oh, got biscuit, great. They will go back to being normal toddler mode. When someone with Asperger's has a meltdown, someone with autism has a meltdown, they are not in control of their physical and emotional state. It is gone beyond them. It has left the building. They could be incoherent, they could be babbling, they could be shouting, they could be swearing, they could be banging their fists on the desk, they could be throwing things. They will not be in control of what they are doing. They might not even be aware of what they're doing. It might be a complete fugue that they have no recollection of the detail of what they do. when that happens. Your job as a manager or a supervisor of someone who has Asperger's syndrome is to support them in the right environment so that they can be as productive as possible and happy and comfortable in that environment, in their zone. They will talk about in their zone. I might come back to in their zone in a little minute, but it's really important that you try and forearm yourself as the manager to think, okay, what impact is this going to have on Andrew? Because he has Asperger's and he's not going to take this kindly. It's not because he deliberately wants to take it unkindly or he deliberately wants to create a fuss. Making that change will send them into a spiral of uncontrolled emotional response. That's what a meltdown is. And they will not be able to control it. So your job is to say, okay, we've got a change. Clients made a change. Let's think about the impact of that. So rather than the boss saying, yeah, we can have it done by the end of the week, no problem at all, no change to program, no change to cost. The better way to do it is to say, for the boss to say, yeah, understand you want to make a change, Mr. Client. Thank you very much for informing me. Can you give me a couple of hours or let me review it with my team and we will talk through it and I will phone you back in a day or so and let you know the impact of that will be on cost, on program, and on the deliverable. It might be that it will cost us additional time. It'll take us longer to do, and there's a cost to that. Our fees will go up accordingly. That gives the boss the opportunity to say to the person with Asperger's syndrome, to say to me, Andrew, just been off the phone from the client. We want to make a change. Let me get my head around it for half an hour or so. Then we'll have a cup of tea and a chat at 4 o'clock because I want your input on the impact that it's going to have, not on you, but on the team and on the delivery and how long you think it's going to take us extra to do. And I can then phone the client back and say it's going to cost us an extra 3 days. That's £1,000 worth of fees, and we can have it to them by Thursday of next week, if that's the case. So let's take the heat. Let's have the discussion before you respond to the client about the impact of that. That's a much better, that gives the person with Asperger's the opportunity to think about what is happening. Okay, made a change, don't like it. First response is don't like the change. But boss has said, we'll have a talk this afternoon. That's okay. Let me formulate my thoughts. And then when we sit down, I can put my thoughts together with his or hers, and we can sit down and we can discuss a way forward and whether there is an impact. It might be that we could do it. Probably not, because I've worked with this client before and this is quite typical of them. Okay, so you then have the discussion with your boss. You flash out your ideas, your thoughts, your impact, the impact that it's going to make on when you're going to need the report done by, and you agree that between you. You say, yeah, it's going to take 3 days. There's me, there's two other people, £1,500 worth of fees. There might be a bit of extra fees for you for reviewing the report. So say 1750, and they can have it by Thursday of next week. I'm happy with that. The bosses then say, "Yep, okay, I'll speak to the client about it, but and I'll let you know what we get back from them. I hope to catch them this afternoon, and we can progress with that." That's a much better way than just dumping a change on someone with Asperger's and saying, "Got to make a change. Get on, do it. Don't bother me with the details. Just get on and do it." That is not going to be productive. Having change to their working environment, their workload, the actual objectives of the work they're doing with someone who has Asperger's syndrome needs to be carefully and thoughtfully managed. You can't just dump it on them. It doesn't work for most people that I know that I've worked with, dumping a change on them. It certainly doesn't work with people with autism and Asperger's syndrome because our brains are wired in such a way that we will be focused on what we're doing. We're absolutely laser focused on what we're doing. And then literally what you're doing is you are upsetting the apple cart. You're doing all these wonderful, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? No, it's gone out of my head. You're disrupting, you're completely disrupting their thought, their train of thought, how they're going about their project. Metaphors, that's the word I was looking for. You put in all those wonderful metaphors about upsetting the apple cart, or you've gone off the rails. All of that is going on in the person's head. So if you are making change, lessen the impact of the change by having a discussion with them and giving them the opportunity to talk to you about the impact of that change. I understand and I accept that sometimes change like that happens. What is important is that the manager manages that change properly. So it's not the change per se, it's the management of the change that is important. So as I said at the beginning, this today's session is about change management. It is all about the management of the change, not the technical nuts and bolts of the change. It's the management of the change, which is the key issue. How do you go about managing the change for someone who's on the spectrum without tripping them over into a meltdown, causing them to be agitated, to have an uncontrollable emotional response in the workplace? Because you want to avoid that. It's not nice. Meltdowns are a horrible thing to have. They're horrible things to watch, because as someone who has had meltdowns, it's very difficult for someone else to be outside of that trying to calm you down, because there's nothing that can calm you down. The only way that I can calm down from a meltdown is to leave me alone, is to let me get away from the situation, because the meltdown will usually happen because of conflict with one person, or shooting the messenger type of thing. It's the messenger, not the message. And that's the thing. It's finding the right way to have the discussion about, we need to make this change. Let's talk about it professionally and see what the impact of that change is. Then what will happen is you will give the person with Asperger's syndrome the opportunity to use their unique problem solving skills and be forthright in being able to say, oh, okay, we're making that change. Well, that might impact this way or this way, and we could do that. It will give them the time to formulate ideas and solutions to the problem, to the change, so that they can then get their head around the change and think of a way to move it forward without going to the left and having the meltdown. You want to go right to resolution. You want to go to resolution mode rather than meltdown mode. So it's really important to understand that as an employer of someone who has Asperger's syndrome, change management has to be done with both of those words together. It's not just the change, it's how you implement the change, how you approach that person about the change, how you interact with them, how you instruct them in the change, and how you involve them. It's so important that the person with Asperger's is involved in the assessment of that change, in the decision-making process for that change, because that way they will then start to take ownership, just as they had ownership of what they were doing before the change, because they will be laser line focused, as I said before. They will then start to feel as though their contribution matters, that their opinion matters, and they will start to take ownership of the change. So they will be starting to process that. Oh, yes, I can do this. I can do that. Well, it might mean that we have to look at that again. I covered that in the report before, or in my analysis. I need to go back and look at that, see how that impacts the outcome of the project. So they'll be starting to formulate their ideas. Give them the opportunity to do that. Give them the time to do that. You know, most change that happens, you can afford half an hour or an hour for someone to think about it and talk through with you once they've had time to formalize their ideas, their opinions. That way, you're bringing them on board with the change. You're managing the change in a professional way so that the person with Asperger's syndrome feels that they're included, which is what you want to happen. We just have a quick look. What do I say here? Plan for contingencies. Yes, when doing change management, the communication of that is so important. And I know I've talked a lot about communication. I'm going to use my three words again. Be clear, be specific, be precise. If you're going to change what someone with Asperger's is doing, be very clear what the change is. Be very specific about what the change is, and be very precise about what the change is. Don't be woolly. Don't be, oh, it might be this and it might be that. Pin it down. Pin it down. Get it written down. Get it recorded from your client, and be absolutely clear on what that change is and how you communicate that with the person with Asperger's syndrome. Give them the opportunity to take part in that discussion on the impact of it to their work and the other team members that you have that they're working with. It may be that your person with Asperger's syndrome has 3 or 4 other people in the team working with them or for them or working together, but has some responsibility over them. They're going to be thinking, this is going to impact on Dave, it's going to impact on Jane, it's going to impact on Julie. How do we organize all of that so that everyone is brought on board with the change, knows what it is, knows what they have to do about it? So change management is really, really important. You need to think of that process of change, not just as change, as in, oh, here's a piece of paper, go and do that. That's the change. Go on, get on with it, and then walk off. You have to put the second word into that to make it viable, and as an issue that can be resolved. Change management. You have to put the two words together. How are we going to manage the change? Identify what the change is, be clear, be specific, be precise. Got that? Then how you manage the change is the important part. Because then you bring the person with Asperger's syndrome on board, then they will take ownership of it, then they will understand that their involvement of it, and they can tell you, yep, it's going to take me a week longer, it's going to take me a month longer, or I might better do it in a day, so the report won't go out till Monday or Tuesday next week, or whatever the scope of the work that you're dealing with. Change management is 2 words. Really focused on that, so that when you're making a change, you're not just dumping the change on someone. Use the second word. The second word is really important. Management. Change management. How you go about that will determine how successful you are at implementing that change with someone who has Asperger's syndrome. They don't like change, so be as gentle and as professional and as inclusive as you can be in getting them on board, getting them to understand the client's made the change, or we need to make this change for this reason. Let them process that change, and then set them off in how you want to go about, how you together have discussed how you're going to deal with that change. Really important that you do that together. That's a discussion between you and them. Yes, you might be the boss, you might be the manager, you might be the director, but you can still have a two-way conversation with someone who has Asperger's on how to implement the change. Because the director might have 10 projects going on in the department. The person with Asperger's has got one, the one that he's dealing with at the moment. So having set them up, you would need to let them run with it. And so they need to be comfortable, understand why the change is, understand what needs to be done, and how they're going to implement that change. So you need to make sure that they are fully on board with the change so that they can run forward with it, take it on board, and have it completed in the time that you think you need to take to do it. So change is 2 words: change management. Much better way of dealing with it than just dumping a change on someone and saying, off you go. It's not going to work. It tends not to work for neurotypical people. It certainly doesn't work for neurodivergent people. So always bear that in mind, that when you're making a change, take the time to do it as 2 words: change management. That's about all I wanted to cover today on session 47 of Talking Asperger's with Andrew. But if you are an employer and you're watching this in replay, and you have any questions about managing people with Asperger's syndrome or managing change at work, please feel free to get in touch. My contact details are there. You can get me on my website at aspergersmatters.com. There's a contact form on there, or you can email me at andrew@aspergersmatters.com. And I'd welcome having a half an hour free consultation with you to see how I can help you about anything about managing someone with Asperger's syndrome, how you would go about it, what to implement, and what strategies and techniques that you could use to get the best out of people with Asperger's syndrome in your business. Because that's ultimately the name of the game, isn't it? Is to employ a multi-diverse workforce that are talented across the board in a whole range of abilities and skills, and managing them together to get the best from them so that the business can thrive and the employee can shine. That's what you want to happen. I can help you do that with my 7 steps program, with tips and strategies and coping mechanisms that I've developed in my time as a geologist before I knew I had Asperger's, although I always knew I was different. And other skills and techniques that I've learned since I've had know I have Asperger's syndrome. I can help you implement them to get your team to work better together and help you manage people with Asperger's syndrome who could just be that spark that you need to overcome a long-standing problem or are great at problem solving, but you just need to know how to integrate them into your teams to get the best from everyone. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and take a look out on LinkedIn on Friday for next week's topic. Although I do know what next week's topic is. It is, what did I say it was? It is going to be problem solving skills. We're going to talk about problem solving skills and how people with Asperger's syndrome are particularly good at that. So that's next week's topic for 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. So until next week, thank you very much for your time. And if you're watching this on replay and have got any questions, please do feel free to get in touch. I'd welcome the opportunity to talk with you and see how I can help you. Take care. See you next week. Bye bye.